Hi, it's Mark Bossert, top local lead generation. We're here with Jason Knox from BC Preferred Restoration, and we're talking about a very concerning subject today: asbestos and lead. Asbestos and lead. How are you doing today, Jason?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, thanks, Mark.
So, what do homeowners need to be aware of with asbestos and lead?
Yeah, definitely. These are hazards that you know live in our homes with us. These materials were used in building, throughout the years. Basically, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even into the 2000s with the lead paint. Um, These materials are safe to have in your house if they're lying just dormant. Okay, you don't need to freak out and go tear your house down because you find out you have asbestos in the floor tile or something. But if you do have to disturb these materials, and they are present, being lead or asbestos, certain precautions need to be taken, to ensure the safety of the people doing the work, and also the safety of you, the homeowner, and your family living in the house while the work's going on.
So, I guess we see it on the renovation shows. They run into friable asbestos or whatever, and I imagine the same thing happens if there's a flood or any kind of work where you guys are involved. Is that when you have to tear stuff out and you discover asbestos, then the abatement procedures come into play? Is that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's right. Exactly what you said. You have a flood, so we have to go in. We have to maybe tear down some drywall or tear out your flooring, to do the proper cleaning and drying in those areas, let's say. Before we do that, we want to make sure that we're not putting anybody's health at risk, and therefore we test for these materials. Again, so as not to make these, in the case of asbestos, make the fibers airborne, so that nobody's breathing them, right? And this is when it becomes a great danger is when you are, like I say, tearing these materials out.
So what do homeowners do if lead or asbestos? What do you do if you find asbestos or lead present in materials that you're tearing apart?
Yeah, so basically how it starts is we start by taking a small sample of the materials that we have to tear out. We take it to a lab that we work with, and the lab basically analyzes these samples, and then within a day comes back to us with the answer as to whether or not there's asbestos or lead in these materials. If there is, it doesn't change the scope of work that needs to be done. It changes the precautions that need to be taken when doing the removal of these materials. And actually, in this case, what we do is we hire an asbestos or lead abatement company to come in and do the removal of these items. They're going to set up the proper containment and use the proper equipment to create negative air situations, is what they call it. So basically, everything they do is to protect the people there in the house while the work's going on, so as not to expose them to these materials.
So where can you find lead and asbestos?
Yeah. So a lot of different places within the house that potentially you would find these materials. The lead is basically in paint, the lead-based paint, wall paint, floor paint, some of the old cabinetry. A lot of the shiny finish paints, if you look throughout your house, there's a chance that this contains lead. Okay. With asbestos, again, many places throughout the house, but some of the most common places where you're going to find the asbestos, especially during a renovation or a restoration project, would be the drywall joint compound, or the mud that is used to basically finish the drywall. The vinyl composite tiles or the vinyl sheet flooring quite often contained asbestos as well. The mastic or the adhesive that is used to keep these materials to the floor, another area that you're going to find asbestos. Insulation, a form of insulation called vermiculite insulation. It looks like almost like small pebbles. And you'll find it sometimes in older homes inside the wall or even underneath the subfloor, for instance. Quite often this material will have asbestos in it and needs to be tested for sure to determine that.
So I guess even in old, really old pipe insulation and stuff as well.
Definitely another good point. Some of the old duct tapes had it as well. Like you say, the insulating wraps on the or the coatings on piping, for sure. That's another place that you'll find it. Some ceiling tiles, another area that you're going to find asbestos, I should say. But the rule of thumb basically is that if you run up against a material and you're not sure if it contains asbestos, you take a sample of that material and you run it to the lab, and the lab will tell you without doubt. There's no guesswork, right? Nobody can look at a material and say this has asbestos or this doesn't have asbestos. They can look at it and they can say, you know, there's a high probability that this contains asbestos, but until it's actually analyzed by a trained technician in a lab, there's no way to tell.
So is the safe removal of lead and asbestos covered by insurance?
Yeah, absolutely it is. You know, they don't want to put anybody's health at risk either, they being the insurance industry. So absolutely, if it needs to be done, it needs to be done, and will be paid for by insurance.
So I guess the couple questions come to mind. So first is lead. Does lead get airborne? Is that an issue with lead paint, or is it just more in the disposal of a really toxic substance?
Yeah, it's a lot less. You have a lot less concern about lead becoming airborne. So you're right, it is a lot in the disposal, but also in the safe handling, and it can also leach into through skin and this sort of thing. So you want to be careful when handling lead-based paint as well.
And is it fair to say that the older your place is, probably the higher the possibility that you've got asbestos?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. I mean, out here in BC, anyways, it's WorkSafe BC who looks after the safe work practices and kind of governs that. They don't give you a strict date, you know, as it is for asbestos testing or when you're going to stop finding asbestos, but they say if you suspect that a material contains asbestos, you need to, you know, have it tested and find out for sure. And when are you going to suspect that it might contain asbestos? The rule of thumb in our industry is that we use 1993 as kind of a cutoff date. So anything built 1993 or prior is going to be tested. You know, in my experience, you're right though. We're not finding asbestos in homes built in 1991, 1992, 1993, but most commonly in homes built, you know, in the 60s and 70s, even into the 1980s.
The stuff must have been cheap. They were putting it in everything, it seemed like.
Cheap and a good material, strong, and it's fire retardant. So I mean, it has a lot of good qualities, and unfortunately, you know, at the time, we didn't know, you know, the health effect that it was going to have on people. I mean, sometimes you just don't know these things, and now that we do know, we do better. And you cannot use asbestos in building materials here in Canada anymore. That being said, like I say, a lot of the homes do contain it, and we just need to be aware that it's out there and test when appropriate.
Sure. Great. This is great stuff, and I think it's a big concern. You know, something that we all need to be aware of as we remodel, you know, merrily along, and as well as, you know, if floods happen, if water damage happens, that you have to be careful about especially in your basement, is probably even an older part of your house in a lot of cases, and if it's been remodeled or has been finished in some way, there's a really good opportunity that there's asbestos and lead paint in there as well.
Yeah, you bet. Good point. And if you do have any questions about you as a homeowner wanting to do a renovation at any time and want to know what needs to be tested, you know, I can always help you out with that as well. Come out and identify these areas for you, even take the samples for you, and give you the information you're going to need to be safe out there.
Awesome. So we've been talking with Jason Knox at BC Preferred Restoration. They're one of the premier flood restoration, water damage restoration companies in Vancouver, Greater Vancouver, Coquitlam, Surrey, all over the Lower Mainland, basically. If you have any issues, give them a call, 604-295-8646, the rains are coming. Get prepared. 604-295-8646. Thanks a lot, Jason.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye.
Bye-bye.